Hello folks and welcome to this Herald Sport video with me, Jonny McFarlane. I'm joined by the Rangers Review's Joshua Barrie on a special loan for the Euros. Josh, how you feeling?
Good, yeah, it's nice weather, isn't it? We had a long day yesterday to get here, but you can kind of, I guess, there's a lot of Scotland fans, and yeah, major tournament. So what is not to love?
Loads to be excited about, and certainly loads of Scotland fans milling about up here. If you're planning on heading up to the stadium, I would have to say there isn't an awful lot happening up here. There's a ring of steel around it as the German authorities aim to get it locked down for the big game on Friday. So there's not an actual lot to see apart from this very futuristic looking oval shape in the background that is the Allianz Arena. I've been practicing that, Josh. Do you think I got there in the end?
Calling it the Allianz Arena, which has been annoying me since we left. So
I'm trying my best. I'm absolutely trying my best, but here we go. So, yeah, in terms of getting here, Josh, for people who are on the way, certainly planning to come here with tickets, I would say give it at least 40 minutes. It does take a little bit of a while. It's not in central Munich by any means. I don't know how many miles it is, but it takes half an hour at the very least. We were actually on a train that stopped before the stop for the stadium, and that made it take even longer. So I'm sure that won't happen on the day. I'm sure every train will obviously be heading directly here, but just want to be aware of. Don't try and cut it fine, a la the Scottish culture of going to the pub until the very last minute and then heading to the stadium. I wouldn't do that on this occasion. And judging by the amount of time it took us to get our press passes, again, give yourself plenty of time to get here, get through the security, because I don't think they're going to be messing around. Right. Well, listen, what we're here to do is to have a quick chat about Germany. We know all about Scotland. I don't think there's a lot of debate about who's going to start for Scotland. We had a podcast on it the other day, and I think we're pretty much, give or take one position, all agreed on who's going to start and how Steve Clarke's going to play. Where I think there's a little bit less information is on Germany, so I asked Joshua to look at the Germans, look at how they've performed under Nagelsmann, and assess what they're doing. So I've got a few notes here on my phone because I can't be expected to know all this by heart. I'm not a professional, I'm just trying my best. But in terms of the way they play, Josh, you've got a piece on Herald Sport today really digging into the detail of the tactical setup that Nagelsmann employs. He's only been in charge for 6 games. He's taken over after a very poor, very negative run of form under the previous manager, Hansi Flick. How's he changed things?
yeah, well, I guess he's still changing things. That's the point, isn't it? Because he's only 6 games in, and that probably leads to a bit of an element of the unknown for the German football watching public as well. I've been watching a couple of their games and obviously trying to grasp, even just being here, what the mood is like. I think their 2 friendlies against the Netherlands and France in March went a long way to building some sort of excitement about the tournament. He actually, I think he had 6 debutants in that camp, so he's changed a lot of the squad. I mean, if you look at the names that aren't involved with Germany, like Serge Gnabry, Leon Goretzka, Mats Hummels, who obviously did well for Dortmund this season, playing in the Champions League final. If you look at the last 10 years of German football, obviously 10 years ago they won the World Cup in Brazil, beat the host 7-1 on home soil. Klopp and Guardiola were in the Bundesliga, competing at the top end of European football. It felt very much like that was the German footballing era. The 10 years since have been some of the most difficult in recent memory, not least because they've exited at the group stage of the last 2 major tournaments. They've actually, which is good news for Scotland, lost their last 3 opening games at major tournaments. Nagelsmann is a figure of change. He's only 36 years old. Obviously, everyone knows him because he's the youngest Bundesliga manager. I think he was like 28 when he was when he first took charge in the Bundesliga, and he's reflected that in his squad. There's a lot of players that are there on form, players from the likes of Stuttgart or Bayer Leverkusen. He's not necessarily just picked the big names. And if you look at the setup and how he's playing, and we'll get into that as well, that is a bit of a change as well. The question for him is, can he replicate what he does at club level, at international level? We're going to get onto some of the specifics about how they play. Germany, actually, like Scotland, have kind of, I would argue, designed their formation and their style around their 2 best players, Andy Robertson and Kieran Tierney for Scotland, Wirtz and Musiala for Germany. So it's only 6 games in. It's going to be their 7th game here against Scotland. A lot of unknowns, which will probably help Scotland somewhat, but definitely more optimistic than they were this time last year about hosting the tournament.
Yeah, on paper they play a 4-2-3-1, but actually in terms of how it looks on the pitch, it's a bit different. You've got here, tends to look like a 3-1-6, which that's terrifying. Sure, 6 Germans attacking with abandon. I mean, Where's that coming from? Who's dropping back into defence first of all, and then I'm assuming it's Tony Cruz orchestrating play in front with everyone else pushing forward.
Well, if we talk about the team 316, I'm sure we'll get me pelters online for that. But I'm just talking about what shape they have on the ball. But effectively, 4-2-3-1. Back four will be Kimmich at right back, Middlestat at left back, who only made his debut in March, I believe. And again, that kind of signposts the fact that this is a bit of a new Germany. It's not just what has been done in the last few tournaments, because obviously the World Cup in Qatar a couple of years ago was horrendous from their perspective. You'll have Jonathan Tah and Rudiger in the middle. Most likely it will be Andrić, who's had that fantastic season with Bayer Leverkusen, next to Tony Kroos. Now, he's come out of international retirement, and again, probably is a bit of Nagelsmann putting his stamp on this team, because he has said that Neuer's going to be his number one, despite the fact he's had a lot of mistakes recently and the fact that they had a difficult history together at Bayern Munich. He has brought Tony Kroos out of retirement, and he's had a pretty good season, hasn't he? And will look to go out on a high by winning this tournament on home soil. But then, as mentioned previously, there are quite a lot of big names that aren't in the squad as well. So it'll be those two in holding midfield. Kroos, as he does with Real Madrid, drop out to the left of the pitch a lot and try and pass forward. Pretty good passer of the ball. In front of them, and this is where I think it's quite interesting, he kind of plays with 3 10s, Musiala, Wirtz and Gundogan. Instead of just playing one of Musiala and Wirtz as the number 10, and they are both number 10s, he's kind of designed this system with the fullbacks providing width, trying to attack narrow, trying to get those two in combination. If you read the piece, which hopefully people will want to do, Gundogan has some really interesting quotes about how his role as that number 10 is to try, and he's obviously the most experienced of those 3 players, is to try and move into spaces that create space for Wirtz and Musiala to occupy. So obviously in theory that can mean that sometimes Germany's attack is quite narrow, and if you watch their game against Greece recently, that does lead to sometimes teams being able to congest the centre, force them out wide where they're less dangerous. But if it works, if you get Wirtz and Musiala in those central areas, they're 2 of the best young players in the world, and they're 2 of the best young players in the world in those positions, and that is what their kind of whole team is centred around. That is their kind of main aim, to get those players and working in combination. And again, if you look at the Greece game, there's some good examples of how that works. Up top, Kai Havertz obviously played very well for Arsenal. I think there's still some questions as to the overall Germany team, especially having been exposed to Harry Kane this season in that stadium behind us. Do they have maybe the experience in that front four outside of Gundogan? Again, it's very early into Nagelsmann's reign as Germany manager, so there's a lot of unknowns, but it's about trying to get those 2 players on the ball in central areas. Havertz and Gundogan both able to go beyond and come short. They've got, I think it's Füllkrug, it's pronounced, from the bench, who scored 11 and 15.
That's not bad.
It's not bad. 9 of which from the bench. That shows you he's a bit of their plan B and will give you a different option. But if you had to ask me now what I think their lineup will be and how they'll approach the game against Scotland, it'll be that 4-2-3-1.
So listen, it sounds like to me Steve Clarke's going to want to make this game a quagmire, a battle, very little space to operating in the middle, because you're then going to push Germany down the flanks where they are less strong, where they have players who are more naturally central, who will want to move inside. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, well, I think they often what you'll see, and if you look at the goal, the offside goal they scored against Greece, what you'll see is the ball goes out to Middlestat at left back, but it's kind of, the ball's only really going out there to create space in the middle, and it's about how, I guess, the 2 teams sacrifice a bit of control out wide and then protect the centre. Do they try and win the ball out wide? Because obviously that's where teams will normally try and press. It might suit Scotland in the sense that they are, I think, a better team without the ball than with it. Now, that's not criticism. I just think that we've seen in even games like the Northern Ireland game, I thought against Finland they were actually pretty good for the first hour of that game. But for me, they're at their best when they maybe don't have quite as much of the ball. They're transitioning forward. They can get Robertson and Tierney on the last line. And they obviously, what Scotland do have is a midfield 4, I would argue, that is going to be able to compete with most midfields here. There's the benefit, I think, of the Scotland team is that 7, 8 of those first team players that Steve Clarke has are used to playing at this level, used to competing against the likes of player that will populate the Germany team tomorrow evening. So I think it might suit Clarke in a sense that he can try and protect the middle, not give Germany much space. But again, I guess the risk of it is all it takes is Musiala or Wirtz to have one brilliant moment, and they're playing in such close proximity to goal, such close proximity to one another, that they can do a lot of damage. But if we know one thing about Scotland under Steve Clarke, is that they are very organised, they are very good off the ball, and they'll definitely need that here tomorrow night.
One last thing just about set pieces. Germany notoriously good and strong in these type of areas. Rudiger, you've got Jonathan Tah, who's a big lad. Saw against Greece, he went very, very close indeed with a header. Yeah. How do you assess how switched on Scotland are going to have to be in that area now. I know it's early in Nagelsmann's reign, and an international manager has got a lot on his plate when he's trying to implement a style of play, given the lack of time he's got. So perhaps set pieces is something that comes further down the line, but it is an international tournament. It will be something they'll be looking at. I'm not convinced Scotland have ever been that strong on the old set pieces at times. You can tell me I'm wrong, but I'm always slightly worried in there. You think back to when I was a boy, Josh, when I was a lad, Scotland had Colin Henry, they had Colin Calderwood, guys who would dominate aerially. Look at that back three at the moment. Grant Hanley's the one for me that can do that. The other two, maybe not. That's not their game. What do you think?
I've not got the number off the top of my head. Hungary actually are the best set piece team in qualification, which is a bit of a worry for Scotland. I mean, Scotland have Austin McPhee, who has got a really good reputation for a reason, and they didn't score that many set piece goals. I think 3 to my memory in qualification. But if you look at your underlying the underlying numbers, and this is included in the kind of Scotland tactical analysis piece, they did have one of the better chance creation per 90 numbers from set pieces. So you're right, they maybe don't have always the biggest players, but they have a lot of clever routines. And I think most importantly, when it comes to set pieces and set piece coaches, if a manager gives a set piece coach the autonomy to I guess put the time into it and train, and that's what you always hear, is that when it is taken seriously, when teams put a lot of time into it, even if they don't have the biggest players, they can work around that in different ways. They can perhaps do some different routines. We've seen Scotland, especially with John McGinn, who has an excellent delivery. We know he'll try and maybe target the front or back post. But you're right, looking at Germany, first and foremost, they are a really big team, and they look dominant in that area. I wouldn't be too worried about set pieces, and this might come back to bite me, but I just think that is an area that Scotland have put a lot of detail and attention into, not least with their coach, which should hopefully mean that tomorrow that doesn't come back to bite them. Hungary is going to be a difficult game for a lot of reasons, but one thing that I don't think people have picked up on that much is that their set pieces are really strong as well.
Okay, well, we can come back to Hungary closer to that game. It's going to be a fascinating game. There's so much to talk about in terms of the way they play and how they're a little bit different, especially with their manager. So we'll come back to that as time goes on. But it's been great chatting to you, Josh. We're going to go and have a look around the Olympic Park, where the fans are going to be congregating for the fan zone. I think 25,000 people expected for the Scotland-Germany game. So we're going to have a look at the big floating screen and see what's there. And we'll report back on that. But until then, thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully everyone who's wanting to see the game can see it. Hopefully everyone that's got a ticket is going to be able to get in, given this security situation that we're seeing around us. As I say, I would underline the fact, get here sharp, get here early if you're planning to come down, because it's already obvious that there's going to be a little bit of a delay, I think, in being able to get in. But, there's that famous German efficiency, so maybe I'm looking at it from a kind of Scottish point of view. So we'll see anyway. Regardless, thanks you everyone for watching, and we'll catch you later.